A foundation is run by a board of trustees, and the standards themselves are set up by a special board called the IASB. The trustees have to deal with the strategy, the governance of the foundation, and they monitor the work of the IASB. So we regularly review the structure, effectiveness, and strategy of the organization. And this is the fifth exercise since we were created in 2001. We do this through an extensive consultative process. We do a public consultation. We work with the Advisory Council, which is one of the important bodies of the organization and represents all sorts of stakeholders. And we have talks all around the globe with all kinds of stakeholders in order to make sure that the functioning is appropriate, to review the possible changes that we should make to our organization, to the way we function, to our priorities, and to foresee the future for the next 5 years or so. Well, the main areas of focus were first the scope and maintenance of the standards. The second one was the implementation issue, which has become critical as the standards have become really global. And the third one was the governance itself, the funding and the way the organization functions. The foundation has a board of trustees that monitors the work of a standard board. And the organization itself is monitored by a monitoring board that is composed of securities regulators. This three-tier structure is appropriate, and so we will maintain it. Having said that, the question of the balance of representation was posed by a number of respondents to our consultation, and mainly the issue of the geographical balance of our organization and the number of members of the IASB. One is to merge North America and South America in one Americas in order to rebalance the representation of this region. And the second decision was with the board itself, the standard board itself, where we decided to reduce the number of board members from 16 to 13, with a possibility to have one more board member, if appropriate, who would be an at-large board member. We will maintain the structure which exists today, which is composed of a majority of publicly sponsored funding, a significant support by major accounting and auditing firms, and some commercial resources coming from selling our books or initiatives of that sort. So we'll maintain this with a view that in the future we would like to stabilize more publicly sponsored funding. Questions were raised with regard to the public sector accounting. We decided that we shouldn't step in that field, as there is a body that deals with it, and we work with them very closely and will continue to work with them very closely, and that is the IPSAS board. We also considered the issue of the non-for-profit entities. Some of them are quite global today, and there is an issue there. But again, as we have a lot on our plate today, we decided not to step in this field and work with those bodies that deal with non-profit entities. Well, there are basically two approaches. On the short term, we are willing to improve the relevance of the taxonomy and make sure that the taxonomy, which is a major tool for proper digitalization of the standards and the bookkeeping, are fully complying with the principle-based standards we develop. This is something we have to make sure it functions well today. And in the longer term, we will develop a network of experts with all sorts of bodies that are involved in this technology developments, be they in the technological side, but also in the user side. And we are speaking mainly of the securities regulators and all those entities that will use technology for improving the access to the standards and the interpretation and the users' capacity to rely on financial information. Well, this is clearly a priority today, as we have become a global organization. More than nearly 120 countries require the use of IFRS, and 20 more permit the use of IFRS. Therefore, consistent application is of the essence, not only for the users, but for the quality of the standards themselves. The quality of the standards could be hindered if they were not implemented in a proper way. So this is a priority. We will deal with it through several initiatives: post-implementation reviews, education. We will try to improve the way we disseminate our advice, education to all kinds of users. And finally, working with those bodies that are involved in the implementation of the standards, namely the accounting profession, the accounting standard setters, but also the securities regulators that are in charge of making sure that the information is of good quality for the sake of investor protection and information. Well, I think next steps are clearly trying to finalize the globalization of these standards. We are very close to it. In a way, companies today can list everywhere in the world using IFRS. But nevertheless, we know that there are a few countries that have not yet adopted, and we will seek a continuation of our efforts to bring them in. Of course, we know that the US is a big stake here, and we'll have to work with them very closely. But we are very encouraged by the progress which is ongoing in Japan, in China, in India, and elsewhere. So this is probably the first priority: finalize the globalization of the standards. And the second one, clearly, is make sure that implementation is appropriate and that we do not see a sort of diversification of the way the standards are implemented in the field. We need to deal with this, which is not very easy and requires very close cooperation with the people who are in the field.